Hello students, this is CA Pragnesh Kanambar and I am here with a very quick, short and crisp video on the amendments of professional ethics which have been issued for the attempt of May 23 attempt onwards. Alright, so when we go to the ICI amendment PDF, it is actually very confusing, this particular set of amendments. Amendments are easy, the way they have printed is confusing. So what they have done is they have copy pasted one notification which was issued by the Ethical Standard Board over here. Actually they should connect with the module pages. All right, okay boss, in this particular paragraph this is amended, in this particular paragraph that is amended. But what they have done is they have just copy pasted the notification as it is over here. Now when students actually compare it with the module, they don't find these paragraphs which they have put over here. Why? Let me hear me out for 2 minutes so that you are relaxed. Professional ethics chapter, whatever you see in the module, the content comes from 3 documents. Volume 1 of the Code of Ethics issued by the ICAI, which talks about ethical requirements. Just ethics, 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 ethics. All right. But let me tell you that volume 1 is printed just in a summary form in the module. They have just printed some 7-8 pages explaining the fundamental principles of professional ethics, integrity, objectivity, independence and stuff. Volume 2 of Code of Ethics is what you study in detail. The schedules to the act, the sections, the guidelines, the regulations. All right, all of that forms part of volume 2. And volume 3 is case law referencer, but anyways, when preparing final CA, you don't have to by heart case laws in audit subject. So what we see in the module is that they have printed heavily the volume 2 of Code of Ethics and they have not printed volume 1 of Code of Ethics in detail, which actually talks about some ethical principles. All right. And the amendments that they have given over here are actually from the volume 1 of Code of Ethics, which is not there in the module itself. And that is why students are, confused, and I'm getting a lot of messages. All right. And maybe many other professors would also be getting a lot of messages about what to do with these amendments. All right. So my simple instruction. First of all, I'm not expecting too many questions from these amendments, but still we need to be safe. My simple instruction is that because this is not printed in detail in the module, you don't have to cover these paragraphs in great detail, downloading the volume 1 of Code of Ethics and going through it and stuff. You don't have to do that. All right. What you're supposed to do is, because if you actually go to volume 1 of Code of Ethics, students, it is of 330 pages. All right. They have not printed that in the module. Otherwise, your chapter will be, it will increase by 330 pages. So what you're supposed to do is, we just need to understand these amendments conceptually and by heart it. All right. And ensure that we are very clear about these points. So that is why my video will be a short one, giving you complete clarity about the amendments that they have printed. Don't end up by hearting the whole volume 1 of Code of Ethics, which is of more than 300 pages, which is not there in your module. All right. Okay, students, so let us straight away come to this announcement. I mean, this announcement which was issued by the Ethical Standard Board on 29 September 2022, which has been printed in your amendment PDF. I have downloaded the bare announcement itself. All right. So the very first amendment is with respect to the disclosure to be given by auditors on how much they are dependent on the client with respect to the fees. Tell me, forget about this amendment and stuff, keep it aside for a minute. Tell me, if my total income is 100 rupees and if I am deriving 25-30 rupees from a particular client, don't you think I'll be too much dependent on that client? Yes. Don't you think that I will be financially interested in that client? Yes. Don't you think that I will have fears of losing the client? Yes. Because I'm too much dependent on that client to earn a very big proportion of my total fees. And that is the reason that in the volume 1 of Code of Ethics, in paragraph 410, they have given some requirements whereby the auditors have to give some disclosure to the institute about how much they are dependent on the client's fees. So I'm going to discuss some disclosure requirements over here. But the first thing that I need to discuss, I need to tell you is that whatever I'm going to discuss over here, with respect to the first point, paragraph 410, these disclosures, discussions are not applicable if your total fees in a financial year is rupees 20 lakhs or less than 20 lakhs. So if your fees does not exceed 20 lakh rupees, then these provisions are not applicable to you. Secondly, if your client is a government entity, nationalized bank, public financial institution, basically entities which are controlled by the government, regulated by the government, all right, statutory corporations, then in that case, that particular disclosure requirements are not applicable. So I'm going to discuss some disclosure requirements with respect to your fees, but it is not applicable in two cases. One, if your total fees of the firm, of the total income, the total fees of the firm, all right, is not exceeding rupees 20 lakh. Second, if your audit client is government controlled entity, could be state government, central government, anywhere, then in that case also these disclosures are not applicable. Am I clear with this? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now let us understand the disclosures. But if you actually want to understand the disclosures, I need to teach you the definition of public interest entity. You know what? Ignore the left side of the chart, of the table, because those are old provisions. Anyways, you did not have it in the module. So anyways, you haven't studied it. So why to study something that is old and then study something that is new? Straight away focus on the right hand side of the table. All right. Okay. So what we see is some disclosure requirements with respect to fees, but for that I need to teach you the definition of public interest entities. Because if your client is a public interest entity, then there are some different disclosure requirements. If your client is a non-public interest entity, then there are some different disclosure requirements. Now, sir, what is this public interest entity? Don't go to your module, you will not find over there. All right. So public interest entity word is defined, all right, in the bare Code of Ethics Volume 1 over there. This is little bit of my working that I was doing when I was just reading this. So they say that listed entity will always be a public interest entity, right? Then they say that an entity which is defined by a specific law as a public interest entity will be considered as public interest entity, but there is no such definition given under the law. Companies Act and all other regulations are working. In future they may give such a definition, but as of now, by heart, first point, listed entity is a public interest entity. You can write down somewhere also, make your notes. Second, look at this. For which an entity for which audit is required by the regulation or legislation to be conducted in compliance with the same independence requirements that apply to audit of listed entities. Such regulations might be promulgated by any relevant regulator, including an audit regulator. Sir, what is this, sir? What is this, sir? Listen to me. Listed entities will be considered as public interest entities. Plus, in your law subject, there is also one concept called as material subsidiary of a listed entity, which law professors always teach you, that which subsidiary is considered as a material subsidiary. So material subsidiary of a listed entity will also be considered as a public interest entity. Second, or maybe third, banks by default they say that consider it as public interest entity. Insurance company by default they are saying consider it as public interest entity. All right, and any other entity as considered by the firm will also be considered as a public interest entity. So if the firm voluntarily wants to consider an entity as a public interest entity, then you can do that. All right, but for your exams, for MCQs and stuff, please by heart listed entity, material subsidiary of listed entity, banks, insurance companies, these entities will be considered as public interest entities. All right, yes. Now everyone over here, let us go to the requirement. If you are an auditor of a public interest entity, and from the total fees of the firm, if the fees that you are deriving from this public interest entity audit client, if this is more than 20%, more than 20%, and if this happens for 2 consecutive years, then they are saying that, boss, you need to provide a disclosure to the ICAI. You need to provide a disclosure to the ICAI. Yes, that, boss, I am auditing a public interest entity, and for 2 consecutive years, the fees that I have received from the public interest entity is more than 20% of my total fees. Hello. But if your total fees is not exceeding 20 lakhs, then this disclosure requirement is not applicable. Or if the client, if that public interest entity is a government entity, then also this disclosure is not applicable. Don't forget that. That is the first thing that I taught you. All right. Okay. So that is the disclosure for public interest entity. If you are conducting audit of a non-public interest entity, then in that case, everything remains the same, just that this 20 becomes 40%. All right. So look at this. Disclosure is required for where for 2 consecutive years. Only if it happens for 2 consecutive years, only then you are supposed to give the disclosure. The gross annual professional fees from an audit client represents more than 40% of the total fees of the firm. All right. Okay. Okay. Very simple. Very simple. These points I have taught you that where this is not applicable. All right. Okay. Disclosure needs to be given to the institute. Okay. Okay. Do not read too much on the left hand side, just focus on the right hand side. Okay. And then this discussion is done. Otherwise, genuinely speaking, if I go to the volume 1 of Code of Ethics, if I look at this paragraph 410, then there are too many points over there, all right, which can be discussed. If all of this is added in the module, then the professional ethics itself will become like a separate subject. All right. Okay. Then look at these amendments. Tax services to audit clients. Tax services to audit clients. Actually, you know what? When you are providing taxation service to audit client, no, you are conducting audit of an entity and you're also providing taxation service. It actually creates advocacy threat to independence, because you are providing audit service, you are also auditing the client, then you're also giving them legal advice on how to defend themselves in taxation. Then you are defending the one whom you are questioning. It actually is the worst thing. It creates an advocacy threat, but in practical life, it is allowed. You can do that. All right. You can provide taxation service to your audit clients. There are some ethical restrictions which are printed over here. All right. Look at this paragraph 604. Lots of things that they have printed over here. All right. But I'm not going to teach all of those paragraphs because they have not covered it in the module. They have just covered one amendment, and that is also an amendment which you can ignore completely. All right. They have just done a little technical change to the definition of the court, because the word court does not include tribunal. But actually speaking, there is not much that I can say over here. I would love to discuss all of this, but if I start discussing it, it will go to 2 hours, 3 hours also. And they have actually not printed these things in the module. If you look at the module, only for the first 13 pages in the module, you will find the discussion. That also not first 13 pages, actually starts from 3rd page to 13th page. So maximum 10 pages you will find in the module that they have taken from volume 1 of Code of Ethics. All right. So I cannot go on and on and on with respect to it. Okay. But yes, these 10 pages of the module you should revise, which I always tell to my students in my lectures also. Because you know, one of the question was also there in November 22 for fundamental principles of professional ethics. So I'm not getting too much into it, but this is a wonderful discussion that whether you can provide tax service to your audit client. The answer is yes, but there are some ethical restrictions, but I'll have to zip up my mouth over here. All right. And then if you see, the next amendment is with respect to NoCLAR. Now, what is this NoCLAR? Non-compliance with laws and regulations. Sir, is this given somewhere? Yes. In the volume 1 of Code of Ethics, they have given separate provisions for a CA in service. That means if you are going for a job, or a CA in practice who is conducting audit. They have given separate provisions that if you find out non-compliance with laws and regulations, then you have to take certain actions. And that is where they have come up with this point, NoCLAR. All right. NoCLAR, as you see over here. Okay. But now let me go step by step, because institute has given it in a little jumbled manner. So if we go to the module, then on page number 13 or 14, 13 of the module, they've printed some content on NoCLAR. In the earlier attempts, it was not applicable. They did not ask questions from this, but now it feels that they may ask a question. So I will try to keep it short, but I will also ensure that I cover all the lines over here for non-compliance with laws and regulations. All right. So first of all, they are worried about CA in practice, okay, who is conducting audit, and they are also worried about CA in service who has been employed. When they find out non-compliance with laws and regulations, they are expected to take certain actions. All right. I will talk about the actions. But first, let me clear the applicability where exactly they have given the amendment. All right. So earlier, When we look at the applicability part, earlier when we look at the applicability part, they had restricted to auditors of listed entities and employees of listed entities. Now they have elaborated it. Now they have elaborated it and given it properly. They say that if you are conducting audit of a listed entity, if you are a CA in practice and conducting audit of a listed entity, and if the net worth of that entity is 250 crores or more, then in that case, you need to be worried about whatever institute has given under NoCLAR provisions. So if I want to keep it very simple, then CA in practice, because this is the amendment, be careful, then CA in practice who is conducting audit of listed entities with net worth of greater than equal to rupees 250 crores, then they need to be worried about these NoCLAR provisions. All right. CA in service who is employed, and if he is an employee of listed entity, then obviously you need to be worried about NoCLAR provisions. But wait, there is a twist over here. Tell me, when you are a fresher employee, junior employee of a listed entity, maybe you're a chartered accountant, but if you're a fresher or junior employee of a listed entity, it becomes very difficult for you to develop an authority and take certain actions. And that is why logically the amendment is that senior chartered accountants who are employed by listed entities, they need to be worried about NoCLAR. And if you're auditors of listed entities with net worth greater than equal to rupees 250 crores, you also need to be worried about NoCLAR. So first, let us clear the applicability which they have given over here in the amendments. All right. Applicable to audit engagements of listed entities with net worth greater than equal to rupees 250 crores. And then if you are a CA in service, but only if you are a senior professional accountant, employees of listed entities, then you need to be worried. Senior professional accountants will be directors, KMPs. Normally, as per common sense, you know that who are considered as seniors. All right. Yes, 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 yes. So applicability done. Now, what is NoCLAR? What are the actions to be taken? See, NoCLAR is non-compliance with laws and regulations. So there is no rocket science attached to it. All right. It is non-compliance with laws and regulations. But let us understand some paragraphs that they have given over here. If I read it, you will feel better. All right. So in the course of providing a professional service to a client or carrying out professional activities for an employer, a professional accountant may come across an instance of non-compliance with laws or regulations or suspected NoCLAR committed or about to be committed by the client or the employer or by those charged with governance, management or employees of the client or employer. Non-compliance with laws and regulation comprises of acts of omission, commission, intentional, unintentional. Oh, omission, commission, intentional, unintentional, which is not complying with laws and regulations. All right. And then they have given a list of people who could be involved in that. Committed by client, committed by your employer, committed by management, committed by TCWG, committed by the employees of your client. All right. But what we need to understand is these examples that they have given over here. First of all, they say that NoCLAR does not talk about personal misconduct of the client or the employers. For example, your client and his wife, both of them are, engaged into a divorce case or something like that. Then, we are not going to report upon it, right? Okay, NoCLAR, non-compliance with laws and regulations, or maybe there is some dowry or some case going on each other. I don't know, whatever they are fighting for, but I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about the professional non-compliances. All right. So following examples would be covered in NoCLAR. We should just go through these examples one. It will make us feel better. Fraud, corruption, bribery, money laundering, terrorist financing, proceeds of crime. We see a lot of these nowadays. Securities market and trading, banking and other financial products and services. You know that these corporate scams, they do happen. Data protection, environmental protection, public health and safety, tax and pension liabilities and payments. All right. There are lots of points that are covered over here in the discussion of NoCLAR. All right. But personal misconduct is not covered, does not address the personal misconduct unrelated to the business activities. All right. Or non-compliance by parties other than that listed out in the definition of NoCLAR. Basically, they are worried about non-compliance is committed by these people. They are worried about non-compliance is committed by these people, and they are worried about these non-compliances. So come on. What did I teach you up till now? First, applicability. Second, what is covered in NoCLAR. Non-compliance is committed by these people. Please go through the list and by heart the list. But I think it is common sense. I don't feel that you will face any problem over there. All right. And then these kind of non-compliances are covered. Personal misconduct is not covered. This is the only thing that I've discussed with you. Now let us go ahead. Here they are just giving some ethical paragraph. You can ignore that. Some important facts about NoCLAR are given below. During the course of providing a service, NoCLAR will be applicable if a professional accountant encounters or is made aware of non-compliance or suspected non-compliance in the course of providing a professional service to a client. He is not required to investigate nor responsible for ensuring complete compliance. This point is well established in the whole audit subject. That boss, I am not James Bond and I'm not going to investigate whether there is a non-compliance or not. I will keep on performing my services. I will keep on performing my duties, and in the course of my audit procedures, in the course of my procedures, if I come across something suspicious, then I will investigate further. We are still supposed to maintain an attitude of professional skepticism. So we are still supposed to act as an auditor and not an investigator over here. Yes, but if there is something doubtful, then we should investigate it further. So let me tell you this point, I am not marking it as important because this is what we study throughout audit subject at Inter C and Final C also. Expertise of laws is not required. Now come on, man. You can't expect me to be an expert of Environment Protection Act, or you can't expect me to be an expert of child labor laws and stuff. Obviously, if there is something doubtful that I come across, then I may appoint an expert and take the services. So professional accountant is expected to apply knowledge, expertise and exercise professional judgment. However, he is not expected to have a level of knowledge of laws and regulations greater than that which is required to undertake the engagement. Whether an act constitutes non-compliance or not is ultimately a matter to be determined by court. So I am not here to stamp and tell you that this is a non-compliance. Normally, I may get some reasons to believe that there is a non-compliance. I may develop some doubts, all right. But don't expect me to be an expert of every law and regulation. These are some important facts. But sir, how they will question this? Maybe in the form of MCQ, which of the following is appropriate, not appropriate, something like that. All right. Certain matters expressly out of purview. Matters that are clearly inconsequential or relating to personal misconduct. Something that is related to personal misconduct is out of the scope, and something that is clearly inconsequential, which has led to a fine of 100 rupees. All right. Are you going to, shout about that? NoCLAR, NoCLAR, NoCLAR. All right. So these things are out of purview. Disclosure which is contrary to law is not required. As per IESBA code, what is IESBA? International Ethical Standard Board for Accountants. All right. Disclosure of matter to an appropriate authority would be precluded, means it will be excluded if doing so would be contrary to law or regulation. Students, is this the new point for you? Whenever we say that, wherever there is a regulatory restriction, जहाँ पे भी law ने ना बोल के रखा है that don't disclose it publicly, then we will not disclose it. So boss, if there are legal restrictions on a particular disclosure, we will not disclose it. All right. I'm doing it straight away from the module because you don't need any fancy notes for this. All right. We can just go through it and just read it once and finish it off. Now, this is something that is very, very conceptual. NoCLAR versus SA 250. It is my humble request. I've uploaded videos of SA 250 on my YouTube channel. If students on the YouTube channel are watching this, it is my humble request that you should go through SA 250 introduction for first 10-15 minutes, and you will realize what they're trying to say. First of all, can I say when we talk about NoCLAR, it is covering CA in practice who is conducting audit of a listed entity's net worth greater than equal to rupees 250 crores. And it is also covering CA in service who are senior employees in a listed entity, correct? But when we talk about SA 250, it is specifically for the auditor of the financial statements. And in SA 250, there is one very beautiful concept. SA 250 says that we are only worried about such laws and regulations which can directly or indirectly have a material impact on the financial statements. Whereas if you see the examples of NoCLAR, NoCLAR is worried about all the applicable laws and regulations may or may not have a direct impact on the financial statements. But see, these kind of non-compliances, everything may not be related to the financial statements. But if it is a non-compliance done by the client in its professional course of business, NoCLAR is worried about it. Right? So they are just giving this such kind of differences. Look at this. SA 250 is applicable only on audit and not on other assurance engagements, whereas NoCLAR covers CA in practice as well as senior CA in service. All right. SA 250 talks of auditors' responsibilities for laws having direct effect on the determination of material amounts and disclosures, and other laws which don't have a direct effect, but still it can indirectly have a material impact. I always give two examples in SA 250. One is taxation law, another one is child labor, all right, such kind of laws and regulations. But when it comes to NoCLAR, it is worried about all the laws and regulations in the professional course of business, which can have a material impact, not necessarily on the financial statements, but still we need to be worried about it. All right. NoCLAR, while being alike to SA 250, it is very much similar to SA 250. So whatever is covered in SA 250 is also covered in NoCLAR. All right. But is further ahead of it, that it takes into account non-compliance that causes substantial harm resulting in serious consequences, whether it could be financial or non-financial terms. All right. So these are two really good differences between NoCLAR and SA 250. SA 250 does not define stakeholders. NoCLAR has defined the stakeholders, but that is okay. As per NoCLAR, that's not a major point of difference. As per NoCLAR, in exceptional circumstances, the professional accountant might become aware of an imminent breach of law or regulation that would cause substantial harm to investors, creditors, employees, or general public. Having first considered whether it would be appropriate to discuss the matter with management or TCWG of the company, the accountant shall exercise professional judgment and determine whether to disclose the matter immediately to an appropriate authority in order to prevent or mitigate the consequences of such imminent breach. If disclosure is made, that disclosure is permitted. This provision is not existent in SA 250. Super point. SA 250, if you remember the last point of SA 250 where I talk about reporting responsibilities, you can also see my revision video of SA 250. Boss, in SA 250, we are supposed to report non-compliances to those charged with governance. Yes. Report in our audit report. Yes. But reporting to regulatory authorities will be done only if it is required by the applicable law. However, NoCLAR says, exercise your professional judgment. If you think that the reporting needs to be done to a regulatory authority or an appropriate authority, please do it. So first of all, NoCLAR is not restricting only to the laws and regulations which have an impact on the financial statements. It is covering impact of other laws also. And it is also not asking you to report only if it is required by law. It is saying that use your judgment, and if you think that the reporting is required immediately to an appropriate authority, then please report it. Right? These are some really good conceptual differences. Applicability we have already covered. All right, and then they have just given some steps to be taken for responding. All right, this box I'm cancelling over here because we know that NoCLAR is applicable to CA in practice conducting audit of listed entities, net worth greater than equal to rupees 250 crores, and senior CA in service who are employees of listed entities. Earlier they were covering junior CAs also, so I'm cancelling that particular box. But whether you are a CA in service or CA in practice, some basic steps to be taken is you need to obtain understanding of the matter. You need to perform some more procedures for that matter. If required, you may seek a legal advice, all right, and determine what further action is required. And if you think based upon your judgment that you need to report it to appointing appropriate authority, then please report it, all right. And you need to maintain some documentation also. Imminent breach is nothing but whatever is the non-compliance, you just maintain working of that documentation of that. They are very clear. Look at this. The appropriate authority. Again and again, they are saying that appropriate authority reported to appropriate authority reported to appropriate authority. They are very clear that appropriate authority for the purpose of disclosure will depend upon the nature of the matter. For example, appropriate authority would be SEBI in case of fraudulent financial reporting. So they are basically asking you to exercise your professional judgment and then determine the appropriate authority. All right. Okay. Students, can I say whenever we report to an appropriate authority, whether you are a CA, senior CA in service of a listed entity, or whether you are the auditor of a listed entity with a net worth greater than equal to rupees 250 crores, if we report based upon our judgment to an appropriate authority, and what if my client or my employers, they put a case against me for breaching confidentiality? They cannot do it. Why? Because NoCLAR is a requirement of the code of ethics, and even code of ethics are mandatory. All right. So that is what they are explaining over here. They are referring to the provisions of confidentiality. And then they are saying that, boss, if you are doing it because of NoCLAR, then obviously, we cannot put a case against you on confidentiality. All right. So that is what they are trying to say over here. Okay. Documentation requirements in NoCLAR. They have just printed this confidentiality provisions, which we already discussed in professional ethics. Documentation requirements in case of NoCLAR. Revised code over and above requires the professional accountant to follow additional documents required as under. First of all, how management TCWG have responded to the matter. So management's responses. What kind of course of action was considered? What was your judgment? All right. How did you analyze that particular matter? Are you satisfied, and do you really think that the responsibility of public interest is fulfilled? Do you really think that you have done your job? All right. And if yes, then what made you satisfied? All right, you please document that. And then they are just giving examples from standards auditing, what extra documentation needs to be maintained. You can just go through that once. All right. So that is a very simple discussion on NoCLAR. The only amendment was in the applicability part. But I thought, let me just go through the whole discussion in the module of NoCLAR so that everyone is relaxed. All right. So I hope that you are now happy with all the amendments of professional ethics. And let me tell you that just by heart the amendments and also just revise NoCLAR once. Apart from that, whatever we have discussed in the lectures of professional ethics, that remains constant. Thank you so much.